We are working on becoming scientifically literate with psychological research. And in this module, we're focusing on finding sources, source citations, and summarizing with integrity. The learning objectives for this lesson are to locate peer-reviewed empirical research articles and to cite sources appropriately using APA style. That includes writing summaries without plagiarism. Once again, just a quick review of the components to becoming scientifically literate with psychological research. Read and evaluate media reports, find original research reports, read and understand original research reports, critique original research reports, and write scientifically to communicate your findings. Because there are really three distinct activities in this module, I will be tackling each one individually. You will find a common copy of the PowerPoints for all three activities on the timeline in Web Study, but I will be recording three distinct videos. In this first video, we're going to work on citing your sources when writing in APA style. When you think about source citations, you should think of them as a kind of directional sign. Citations guide the reader back to the original source so that the reader can determine the credibility of the writing as well as to get more information. There are two different kinds of citations. In-text citations, these are the citations that are found in the writing per se. If you look in your textbook, you will find in-text citations on just about every page. From that information, you can go to the references listed at the back of the textbook and find the original source. The second kind of citation is that of the reference list. In the back of your textbook, you will find all the references used in our text. Remember that every reference on the list is also in the textbook as an in-text citation, and every in-text citation is associated with a citation in the reference list. Let's start with in-text citations. Anytime you summarize someone else's words, thoughts, or ideas, you must cite that source. Think about summarizing an article in a paper. You might refer to the ideas from that paper several times in one paragraph. Remember, you only need to cite that source once in that paragraph, even if it is referenced several times in a single paragraph. Here is an example of a source within text using the article that you read in the last worksheet. Note that the sentence is about the findings of the research and that it is then cited within the parentheses with the author's last name, comma, and the year of publication. If I want to find more information, I can go to the reference list and look under the author's last name. In this class, we will use three main types of references in text. The first is what we looked at on the last slide. The statement is made and followed by the author's last name, comma, and year in parentheses. The second is when you reference the author in the sentence itself. You always reference the author by last name only. That is then followed by the year in parentheses. The third is when you combine both the author's last name and the year within the sentence itself. Here is a detailed explanation of in-text citations. The first two represent those citations incorporated in some way within the sentence. Citations 3 and 4 represent parenthetical citations, that is, citations that are listed in parentheses. In both cases, remember that you only refer to researchers by their last name. When you have multiple authors listed as part of a sentence, as in number 2, you include the word "and." But notice that the parenthetical reference with multiple authors in number 4, you use the ampersand, not the word "and." Finally, I have given you the summary from the APA Publication Manual. Refer back to this page when you are doing in-text citations. In addition to being included in the PowerPoint handout for this module, you will also find this summary as a separate page on Web Study Module 3. One other thing I want to mention in regard to in-text citations, and that is when you use direct quotes. First, you should rarely use direct quotes. It is much better to put the ideas into your own words than to try to string together a series of direct quotes. When you do use a direct quote, you must always put the text in quotation marks and follow the quotation with the parenthetical citation, the author's last name, the year, and the page number. The specifics in terms of formatting can be seen in the example on this slide. Now let's turn to reference citations. Remember that these are the references that are listed at the back of your textbook, or in the case of your writing in this course, at the conclusion of your writing. Remember that if you use an in-text citation, that must also appear in your reference list. Likewise, every reference listed in your reference list must be included in your in-text citations. Your reference list should be alphabetical, according to the primary author's last name. One thing to remember is that in APA references, we always put the order of the authors as they are listed in the article. This is important because that order is based on the primary role of each author in the research. The first person listed in the article is the primary author and should always be listed first. As I did with the in-text citation, here is a detailed diagram that walks you through the reference citations for a research journal article. You start with the author's last name, comma, followed by first and middle initials with a period. Before the last author, when there are multiple authors, you add an ampersand. This is followed by the year of publication in parentheses, period. Then the title of the article. Note that only the first word of the title or subtitles and proper nouns are capitalized. The end of the title of the article is another period. Then the name of the journal, comma, and volume number. These are both italicized, followed by a comma and the page numbers. In some cases, you will find a DOI. This stands for a Digital Object Identifier. When a DOI is available for the article, you should list this after the period following the page numbers. There is no period after the DOI. By the way, you can search for an article by entering the DOI in the search box. Again, in addition to being included in the PowerPoint handout for this module, I will also post this page in the Module 3 folder on Web Study. Here is an example of a media report, the one that you just read in the last module. You will see that it closely resembles the format of the research article. First is the author's last name, comma, the author's first and if included middle, initial, period. Then the date. In this case, because it is a periodical, you list the year, month, and day, when appropriate, all in parentheses. This is followed by the title of the article, and as was true in the last example, only the first word in the title or subtitles and proper nouns are in uppercase. At the end of the title is period. This is followed by the title of the periodical, which is italicized. Since this was found online, you follow this with retrieved from and the URL. If this was a print periodical, you would follow the title of the periodical with the volume number, also in italics, comma, and the page numbers. Now, from a peer-reviewed article, can you find information for the reference citation? Here is the reference citation. Here's a review of reference formatting. Authors' names, up to 7 names are listed in the order in which they appear on the article. Last name, first and middle initials when provided. use an ampersand before the last author's name. Year of publication, in parentheses, followed by a period. Title of the article, capitalize only proper nouns and the first word in the title and subtitle, followed by a period. The title of the journal or periodical, italicized, followed by a comma. Volume number of the journal or periodical, also italicized and followed by a comma. Page numbers. Remember, no P period before the numbers, and the whole thing is followed by a period. Insert the digital object identifier, DOI, when available, but no period after the DOI. Your worksheet for this part of Module 3 is the APA Style Citation Worksheet, and here is the basic grading rubric for that worksheet.